at schools, and specifically have a better sense of belonging. It's an equity issue as well, and specifically I want to talk about this. It's a racial equity issue. When we go back to 1976 and desegregation started, there was the combination of the city schools of Louisville and the Jefferson County schools to become one school district, Jefferson County Public Schools. For the next 8 years, both white students and black students had to leave communities in order to achieve diversity at schools all over Jefferson County. Beginning in 1984, that changed, and only students in the area that we call the choice area, which is predominantly West Louisville, only those families, only those students were the ones that had to leave their community in order to achieve diversity. Far worse than that, the elementary school, the middle school, and the high school plans were all developed separately. And so when we say student assignment, many families take advantage of magnets, but these are students, and 85% of our students of color are students that take their assigned school, meaning whatever their assigned school is, that's where they attend school. And so when we have developed an elementary and a middle and a high school plan separately, what it has done is ensured that there are no feeder patterns from elementaries to middles to high. Most of our elementary school families that live in West Louisville pick an elementary school in West Louisville as their first choice. As a matter of fact, 75% of the families do. But unfortunately, after that time, they have no ability to choose a school close to home and must leave their community to go to schools all over Jefferson County, many times taking long bus rides, many times missing school because they miss the bus and can't easily get to school. And students in other areas of the community of the city don't have to do the same thing. More specifically, 95% of the students who have to leave their community in order for us to achieve diversity in our schools are West Louisville black students. And I believe that is inequitably unfair, and it must be changed. We must focus on student outcomes and student belonging and give every student choice. A student in Middletown deserves choice, just like a student in the Shawnee community deserves the same choice. So that's where it's about equity, and specifically I want to dig into an example of where this negatively impacts children of West Louisville and families. I can talk about a student who enrolled in King Elementary School. The family put King Elementary School as their first choice because they lived very close to King Elementary School. They were able to walk to school, go to school, kindergarten through 5th grade at King Elementary. Unfortunately, they didn't have that option in middle school. Their assigned school is Cameron Middle School in the far east end, about 15 miles away, all the way out by Ballard High School, a very long bus ride. Now, I would believe if we had effective feeder patterns and that same student had the opportunity to then go to Ballard High School, which is nearly right next door with their peers and the same programs that Ballard might have, it would be effective. But not in our current student assignment plan. Right now, that child would be assigned to Valley High School in Valley Station, 10 to 15 miles on the complete other side of town. And so a student from West Louisville, this student wouldn't even be able to go to school with their peers, be in the same program. They would have to go to a different school on the other side of town that has completely different programming. So what do I believe? I believe we implement a student assignment plan, first and foremost, that the feeder systems are aligned. That all students in a specific neighborhood can go to the same middle and high school together and matriculate through school on that same feeder pattern. Secondly, I believe West Louisville students and families deserve choice, just like a family in Middletown or J-Town or Fern Creek or Valley Station. They deserve that same choice. So what we have to do is make sure that we develop and resource schools in West Louisville appropriately, give great programming and options for our students, and give them and you the choice to attend a school close to home or to continue to go to a school outside of your community. That would be the choice of West Louisville families, and I believe that's the difference that we have to make. For 4 decades now, 38 years, the families of West Louisville have bared the responsibility and the onus of diversity in our schools all over this community. And now I believe it's time that we give choice in great schools, that option to families of West Louisville as well. Thank you. Hi, I'm Marty Pollio, Superintendent of...
Hi, everybody. I am Sadiqa Reynolds, President and CEO of the Louisville Urban League, and I want to thank you all so much for coming out with us tonight on a Tuesday, sort of a cloudy Tuesday. We really do appreciate it, and it is the right thing for us to ensure that our students have every resource possible. I want to thank our partners in this. First of all, to the Pulitzer Prize winning Courier Journal, I want to thank you all so much for partnering with us on this wonderful opportunity to really educate our community and allow folks to give feedback on what is to be the student assignment plan. And so thank you to Mary Irby Jones, who is the executive editor of the Courier Journal. Thank you to Vita. You all not clapping? I say you clap for the Pulitzer Prize winning Courier Journal. Also, thank you to Vita Morgan. Thank you to Mandy Mclaren. And then you will also see Bailey Loosemore running around here somewhere. We will have the opportunity to text in questions. If you have a phone, there will be a text number up on the screen at some point. You can text your questions in. For those of you who are technically challenged, you can write them down, and Bailey will be walking around and she will get those questions. If you are up in the stand, she's not going to come up there. She's only going to sort of manage this part of the space. But, you know, you all can text. You can text up there because we really do need everyone's feedback here. And so I just want to acknowledge really the trying times that we are living in. And I said this when we had the press conference about this event. We certainly recognize at the Louisville Urban League that people are stretched and strained about as much as we can take, honestly. And I think we need to be really truthful about that. And it says something about our community that you would come out. It says that you really do understand that it could be another 40 or 45 years, yes, before we have the opportunity to change or influence this student assignment plan again. We are here with you, the Urban League, listening and trying to ensure that we understand and that we are using our voices. And that is why, that is the same thing that we want you to do. We want you to listen, to understand, and make sure that you ask the questions that you believe need to be answered for your household. This educational system has not worked for our children, and it was not designed to work for our children. And I think that, thank you, when you listen to the words that Dr. Pollio said in the video that, I don't know if you could see it, if you could see over our heads and you could see it, but I think it's important to understand the damage that has been done in our community by the current student assignment plan. It simply is not acceptable. And so the question becomes, where do we go from here? What do we do next? And that is the thing that we are all charged with helping to inform. And so this is a very important conversation. I think this may be the conversation of our lifetime in this city. And so I thank you so much, not just for tonight, but there will be future conversations. There will be opportunities for you to weigh in, and I am begging you to do it. You never, this city never, oh, that's a lie. I was going to say this city never disappoints me. That's not true. But you don't. You never disappoint me. And so I'm just asking you to do everything that you can to make sure that our children are taken care of. So there are folks who are looking online. Welcome to the Norton Healthcare Sports and Learning Center. This is the house that we all built together. This house, this place in the West End belongs to us. Thank you for coming home, West Louisville. And I'd say to you this, I am a mother, I am a JCPS parent, so this conversation matters to me very much. I certainly had a hand in choosing the panelists. These panelists are here because we believe that they will ask the questions that you have asked us when you come into the league. And I always tell people when they say, well, what kind of survey did you do? What kind of, listen, 23,000 people a year, 23,000 visits a year into our building. We're doing housing, workforce. People are asking us questions, so we tried our best to help inform some of what you will hear tonight, but we also have an amazing and talented panel that will do the same. And then there is someone else here that I want to take a moment to talk about. Mandy Mclaren will be facilitating the conversation tonight. She is a skilled investigative journalist. She and her colleagues at the Courier have spent a considerable amount of time dedicated to pulling apart and explaining the complicated and nuanced issues facing JCPS and education in general in the Commonwealth. The care and thoughtfulness with which Mandy in particular approaches this work comes from a genuinely informed place, as she herself is a former middle school teacher. We are honored today to have Mandy in the house, and here's why we wanted her so desperately to facilitate this conversation. Because she asked the question, she understands the follow-up, she digs a little bit deeper, and that was really important for us because you deserve that. You deserve that. And so I'm really proud that we were able to get these folks together to engage in this way. And then I want to point out somebody else. So we've got the obvious folks, but we got somebody else that you all might not know. And I'm not going to have another opportunity to speak to you, so I'm going to say what I need to say. Brent McKim is the chair of the Teachers Union. Whatever, don't clap yet, listen. Whatever happens, we have got to make sure that the teachers that we have prayed for and stood with and protested with, that they are with us. Our children are not being educated as best they can be. And it is not because teachers don't care. It is not because the teachers don't want to. We have teachers who are spending their own money, investing in our students, loving our kids, wiping their noses. We need to make sure that when we decide we want this student assignment plan, we get a full-throated endorsement from this teachers union that we have stood with every step of the way. And I say that as a black woman, as a mother, and as the president of the Louisville Urban League. And so with that, I bring you Mandy Mclaren. Oh wait, no, I can't do that yet. Before Mandy, if we have elected officials in the room, especially school board members, if you could please stand. I'd just like to recognize you. Thank you so much. Corey Scholl is here, board member. We have anyone running for office, if you could please stand. Oh, I can't see everybody. We have a candidate for mayor in the back, Tim Finley. We also have Tricia Lister, who's running for judge. I don't know who the second row is. Can you say your name? Running for judge? Sarah, what's your last name? Stalker, running in District 34. All right.
Sadiko, you have one in the bleachers.
Somebody in the bleachers? I told you I wasn't looking at the bleachers. Who is that? Okay. I assume y'all heard that. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. All right, and so now I will turn it over to Mandy. I thank you all for engaging and for constantly showing up. It is my honor to serve you in this capacity. Thank you so much. Thank you to the panelists.
Well, thank you, Sadiko, so much for that kind introduction and for having me here tonight. I really do feel privileged to be here and feel the responsibility to get the community the answers that they deserve. So without wasting any more time, I'm going to point you to the text number in case you did not catch it on the screen yet. The number is 502-354-8601. All you need to do is send a text to that number. You can send as many texts as you want throughout the evening, and we will be responding to them. I am going to start by introducing two folks who are going to handle basically the first third of our show. The first one probably needs no introduction to most of you, but I'm going to do it anyway. We have Dr. Marty Pollio, who is the JCPS superintendent. He began leading the district in the summer of 2017 before becoming permanent superintendent in February 2018. He began his career in 1997 at Shawnee High School as a teacher, and in his, I think, 20 years around the district, maybe, he served as assistant principal at Wagner, principal at J-Town, and principal at Doss. His daughter, who is a high school senior, has participated in magnet programs since she was in elementary school. So I think it's pretty fair to say you've been around when it comes to student assignment.
Correct.
Our second woman here to join us along with Dr. Pollio in the educational intro of this is Amanda Averitt Bush. She is the Executive Administrator for School Choice for the district. She also goes pretty far back, being a member of this district, joining it in 2006 as a special education teacher and counselor at Valley High School. And since she's come over to really lead the school choice and student assignment reforms at the district, she's participated on pretty much every committee that's been happening in the past several years that have led to these proposals you'll be hearing about tonight. So we're very happy to have you both here to educate the community, and I'm going to pass it right off to you, Dr. Pollio.
All right, thank you, Mandy, and thank you for everybody for being here. What a great group we have here. Very excited to see the amount of people that have come out to engage with us in this student assignment conversation. First and foremost, it was painful to sit here and listen to myself over and over and over again. So you guys are probably already tired of listening to me. But to Sadiq's point, I think that did sum up the past a lot. Or I should say the past, where we currently are as a school district with our student assignment plan. I want to say this, there's very few, if any, large school districts in America right now not debating student assignment, how to ensure diversity in their schools, how to mitigate poverty amongst dramatically increasing childhood poverty numbers in our country. And I want to say that again because I think that's so important. 25 years ago, we had less than half of our students as free or reduced lunch in Jefferson County Public Schools. We're closing in on 70%. 70% of the students in Jefferson County Public Schools are free and reduced lunch. Really difficult. The more poverty you have, the more difficult it is to mitigate some of the things that happen, especially with children, as a result of that. I'm not saying that we wash our hands of outcomes, but the challenges remain and the challenges increase. And so when we talk about student assignment, though, Jefferson County is very unique in many ways. And so I'm not going to, I've talked for 2 or 3 years now about the problems with our current student assignment plan. I hope you've heard that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. What I am going to spend a lot of time on are what I believe the solutions to be. And so there is no perfect solution. There is none. When we have the 5th most segregated housing community in the United States of America, that's what we have right now. It becomes very challenging then to say, how are we going to have diverse schools without putting it on the backs of certain students? That's the challenge we face as a school district. But in the end, what I'm focused on in this is student outcomes. That's what I'm focused, and we have to do better. It is very clear. We have had the past 30, 40, 50 years. The same gap exists. The same things are happening to students each and every day that we need to mitigate or stop and eliminate that achievement gap. And I want this to be clear. I'm not saying the only reason we have this gap is because of the student assignment plan. I want to say that up front. There are many factors that go into success for students. Student assignment being one of them, but I'm not just blaming it on student assignment. However, we have a student assignment plan that puts the onus of diversity on our neediest children, and it's been doing that for 40 years. Secondly, we have a student assignment plan right now that hasn't been evaluated in 40 years, and I mean significantly evaluated. It's been tinkered with, but it has not been changed in 40 years. So I will tell you this, no matter what, that should not happen. The community should ensure that at a minimum, this is happening at least every decade in a significant way and digging deep into it. Because when this student assignment plan was drawn, they were not using technology or computers to do that. And I have seen through this process, there's people that know a lot more than I do and have a lot better technology than I do that can ensure that we make a much more equitable student assignment plan. And third, we have a student assignment plan, as you heard, that were drawn separately. An elementary school plan, a middle school plan, and a high school plan. And by the way, then we have a magnet school plan as well. We have 4 student assignment plans. We don't have one. And that is not effective or efficient. If you talk to any principal, they will tell you the ability to collaborate. If I'm a high school principal, when I was a high school principal at J-Town High School, to collaborate with my middle school partners to say what students do we need to provide interventions for, to work on, provide wraparound. So we couldn't do it because there was 8, 9, or 10 middle schools from all over town. That is not effective for student outcomes. And so those are the things that we have to change. I've been in this district now for 25 years, believe it or not. So 25 years. And for 20 of them, I was in a school. I was at Shawnee, Wagner, J-Town, and Doss. All schools that at one point or another someone has indicated as being low performing. All schools that serve students of West Louisville. And for most of those years, I felt like something wasn't right with the student assignment plan. I would meet the buses outside at the start of the school day, and kids would come in on the buses. And I would see that the engagement that students had that came in off of they just weren't engaged in school like I knew they needed to be. I call that sense of belonging now. And I think you ask any educator, they will tell you when a student has a sense of belonging, they will much more likely to be successful. That sense of belonging in a school. I will tell you this from my experience as an educator, when a teenager especially, they're going to have a sense of belonging in a school, or they're going to find their sense of belonging somewhere else. We want it to be in the school, and that's where we need it to be for successful outcomes. And so as I took this superintendency, I said, well, I know we got a problem with student assignment. Hadn't been done in 40 years. Time for me to start studying this. I have really studied this over the past 3 or 4 years. And the more I peel away at the onion, the more problems I find in this student assignment plan. That is negatively impacting student outcomes and student belonging. It's not the only thing that contributes to it, but it is a major factor in the problems that we face each and every day. I've come to know this student assignment better than almost anyone, maybe with the exception of this young lady behind me here who will be talking to you in a little while. And so in the 2 or 3 years I've been talking about this, I think it's important to know, I have not had one person tell me, not one person say, what we're doing now is right. I think Sadiq will point to this. What we're doing now is good, let's not touch it. Unilaterally, people have said what we're doing now is not working. And so instead, let's figure out a way to change it. Now, I'm going to tell you, it's going to be hard. It has been hard for me to stand up here and do this. It's hard for me to stand up here, in this facility in West Louisville and say we need to change specifically for students of West Louisville. We need to change for all. You will see we have flaws in the entire system, but predominantly for students of West Louisville. And that has been hard. And that's why no superintendent has touched it in 40 years, because it is difficult and challenging. But Amanda behind me, we have talked a lot together, Robert Moore, our chief of schools, who also went through this student assignment plan. We said this, it's a moral imperative that we do this. Someone has to say it's got to be now. And that's where we are right now, and that's what we want to share with you today. Now, a lot of people want, we have some great recommendations, I believe. 2 years ago, we had some recommendations. This is far beyond that. This is all-encompassing elementary, middle, and high, and our magnet programs. I'm going to tell you this. This will not go in front of our board for a minimum of 2 months. So we have 2 months to do this right here. Your feedback is critical in this, especially when we get into the school support plan. It is imperative that we support and resource the schools properly, provide the funding necessary to make sure that our schools in our highest poverty areas have the most resources. And I'm going to quote Miss Maddie Jones here. I don't know if she remembers saying this. She's in the front row here. But in a book by Tracy K. Meyer, she said, and I'm not be able to use the same colorful language that she did, but I'm just summarizing here. She said, essentially, we want to be able to go home, but we don't want those sorry schools that were there before. We want our schools to be resourced and to be quality schools. And that's what we want to provide. We need your feedback in that. But my point is we have 2 months to do this. And so I don't have all the answers. We don't have all the answers. I believe we have a really good plan to bring to you, but we also need your input and feedback over the next 2 months before taking it in front of our board so that we can implement something different that is going to impact our kids significantly. Now, I'm going to tell you, this is hard and confusing. I could do this in 2 hours. They gave me 20 minutes. I don't know how I'm possibly going to get you to, you will, when I'm done, you will be like, what did he just talk about? You can promise you it's the right way to go. So we can just stop. I'm just kidding. But all of these things will be available on our website around student assignment. I would encourage you to look into it, to study it, to understand it, to ask questions, to give us feedback. That's the important part of this. So it's really hard. I'm going to do about 20 of student assignment. Amanda's going to do 10 or 15 about magnet schools. Now here's where it comes into play. What's the difference? Student assignment and magnet. They're all about choice, but student assignment is the school I go to if I just take the assigned school the district gives me. If I call the district and say, I live at 123 Main Street, what school do I go to? And they say, you go to XYZ school. Take up proof of residence to the school, they will enroll you and get your child in classes. That's an automatic. That's a student assignment. We have that K through 12 for every student in this district. Some people call it their reside school, but that's what student assignment is. Magnet schools and programs within a school are the opportunity for students and families to apply for schools that may have a program of interest or a magnet of interest for them. And we still want to do that. That is an important part of this work. Research shows student belonging, when a family says, I want my child to learn a specific way, and they choose a school for a reason, they're more likely to be successful. That makes sense, right? I mean, if I have a child who, now, if I had gone to performing arts school in elementary school, if my parents had put me in performing arts, I'd have been miserable. All I wanted to do was dribble a basketball. But, you know, my sister would have loved it and been great. And so we still want those opportunities, those learning experiences that engage kids. But what we have to do is make them accessible to all. These were built in 1984 to be exclusive. I'm not going to hide here about this. In 1984, it's well known, they were built for white families in the suburbs. And that's what they've become. When other cities have built just thriving magnet programs that bring kids from all over the community into a very diverse setting. That's what we have to have. We have to have it. So Amanda, thank you. Amanda will talk about that. Specifically, I'm going to talk about the assignment piece of it. I will remind you the vast majority of our kids choose their assigned school. And as you heard me say, about 86% of our students of color don't even apply for a magnet. They take their assigned school. We got to get better at that, but we also got to make sure the assigned school is a great school for them as well. So as we run through this, you know, I said we haven't undergone a comprehensive change in 40 years. That has to change. I told you the history. I won't go through it as much again. You know, 76, and I want to say this, the community did miraculous things. To think within 6 months that they combined 2 districts, 2 boards, 2 superintendents into one. I can't even imagine what that summer must have been like for educators to try then to be prepared. You know, the National Guard on buses to ensure kids. I mean, that was miraculous stuff. And at that time, like I said, it was near 50-50. Students being transported from one community to another to achieve diversity. That changed in 1984. And we have to call it out and say it. In 1984, essentially what was said is white families in the suburbs can stay close to home, specifically, and our inner core, specifically what is called our satellite area now, we'll chop that up into a bunch of pieces that correlate to another school, and those students will now have to leave their communities for the sake of diversity. That's the way it's been for 40 years, and on top of that, let's make sure we build these magnet schools that attract folks from the suburbs. So let's level set. Let's be honest. That's where we are right now. That's what happened today. Today, a child got on a bus down here or missed a bus. Today, a family, a mother sent one child to Cameron Middle School and another child to Valley High School. That happened today. That might be you. That happened today. And it will happen tomorrow. And we wonder, how is a child, how is a family, how's a mother supposed to be engaged when got to go from West Louisville to Cameron Middle School to Valley High School? That happened today. The time to change is now, guys. That is racially inequitable. I could use stronger words, but I think that is extremely problematic when we talk about outcomes for our kids. These are the pillars we've built student assignment on: equity, access, ease of understanding, diversity, and choice. I think we're 0 for 5 right now as a community, as in a district. We got to get better at that, and I think this plan does that. We have to know our current plan. These are facts. Current plan. Our black and brown students are more likely to attend a Title I school. Title I means high poverty. In JCPS, that's 70% of the kids qualify for free or reduced lunch. Think about that, 7 out of every 10 in a school. Many of our schools have 90% free and reduced lunch, 9 out of 10. But more likely to attend a Title I school. Even the students we are sending, like a student that I just said, to Valley High School. Valley High School is a high poverty, majority minority school. So we are sending them to a high poverty school. 3/4 of the kids that are bused out of the satellite area to schools outside of the community are being bused to a Title I school. So they're leaving their community to go to a high poverty school. More likely to attend an under-enrolled school. More likely to attend a school farther away from home due to assignment, not a magnet. I get that all the time. You know, I'm talking about assignment, not magnet. More likely to attend a non-magnet school, and more likely to have a lower sense of belonging. I talked about sense of belonging and how important that is. The research is clear on it. Here is one of the most recent research. In sum, when students experience a sense of belonging in a learning environment, we see both immediate and long-term positive consequences for their academic performance and well-being. There's not an educator out there that wouldn't tell you that. When a kid feels a sense of belonging, it doesn't matter to me if it's a class at the school, a teacher at the school, a program at the school, an extracurricular at the school. When they feel a sense of belonging, those things will happen, which is positive consequences for academic performance. We all know that. We've got to do better at that. We also know that right now in JCPS, our black students have a lower sense of belonging than our white students. That has to change. It is not all because of student assignment. I want to make that clear. But it is partially a result of student assignment. And we have to tackle this one right now. And so here is our future state vision. I say future state all the time because this is what I want. We say current state, what it looks like now. Future state, what we want it to look like 3, 4, 5 years from now. First and foremost, and Amanda will talk about this, we want to foster a transparent, trustworthy system of resource magnets serving a diverse population. So let me break that down for you. Here's what we want. We want great magnet programs that attract students to the school. We want them to be diverse, that reflect our student population, and we want parents to know why or why not they didn't get in the school. It's as simple as that. That doesn't seem like a tough concept to me. We can do that right there, right? I mean, great magnet school with great learning opportunities, serving a diverse population that reflects our student population, and number 3, parents know why they got in or didn't get in. It's transparent. We can do that, and she's going to tell you how. We're going to provide black and brown students with a choice to attend thriving, diverse schools close to home with strong programs and improve experience for all students. So I want to say, yes, I will focus in a lot on West Louisville and black and brown students, but this will improve for all students. And that's what we have to have. And so here's what we're going to give you. I know this is a lot on here, and you're probably worried I'm going to talk for an hour, but we've really pared this down. First of all, the boundary adjustments. We are changing all the elementary school clusters. We're not having any clusters with numbers anymore. Right now we have cluster 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 13. What does being in cluster 7 mean to anybody? That's nothing, right? So what is cluster 7? They are not connected in many ways, very ineffective. I didn't know elementary until the past couple years. It's as problematic as middle and high. But we're going to have feeder patterns with predictability for families. We're going to optimize building capacity since we haven't changed this in 40 years, our population has shifted in this county in 40 years. And we haven't changed with that. And so we have schools with 125% building capacity and the other one with 55%. It's not effective. And then maintain choice for families not in the choice. So all families get choice. Then the green to the left of that, we're going to have a dual resides. I've talked about that a lot, but essentially we are guaranteeing a choice for students, what we will call in our choice zone, which is where we sit right now, our choice zone, that's guaranteed multiple choices at each level, elementary, middle, and high, a close-to-home option and an away-from-home option. We're going to talk about our support plan for those schools. Amanda will talk about magnet strategy and briefly our new technology, and honestly, we have to do a better job of outreach to families, especially in West Louisville, to make sure that we get families applying early, because right now what's happening is those that apply first get the first seats. And we've got to do a better job making sure we have outreach to families. So let's look at this. First and foremost, we are going to have a choice zone, which you will see in a second. A choice zone is guaranteeing 2 options, 2 schools at a minimum at every level for families in the choice zone. And I want to reiterate, that option is guaranteed for the family. It is guaranteed. They have the opportunity, if they want to stay home close to peers. They have the opportunity for increased participation in activities, athletics that lead to student belonging. Amanda, right behind me, grew up in West Louisville, she probably will tell you. She went to Stewart Middle School. That's where she was assigned. For her to participate, was it dance or cheer? Dance. For her to participate in dance, which was her passion, she had to stay after school and then take a TARC from Valley Station back here to West Louisville at 11 years old. That's what had to happen for her to participate in dance. And then we wonder why we're not getting the participation levels that we need to and getting kids participating in positive things at schools. That's what we have to do. Family engagement, I told you a parent going to parent-teacher conference at Camerer and Valley is an impossibility. It's an impossibility. And ease of understanding for family. So I know this is going to be a lot to see. This is essentially where we are now. It is predominantly West Louisville, but as you can see, there are other areas of the city as well. Smoketown, some southwest Louisville. If you saw the old maps, this choice zone was chopped up into about 20 to 25 different blocks. And then on the far side where the red is right now, the light red, was the only spot where Shawnee, the academy at Shawnee, had students assigned to it. I taught at Shawnee in 1997-98. There were 800 students in the school. We were lamenting, why is no one choosing Shawnee High School? Fast forward 25 years later, there's 450 high school kids in the school. And everyone is saying, why aren't they choosing Shawnee High School? They're not choosing it because they don't have access to it. And so when you condemn a third floor, when you don't have students to build strong programs, when you don't invest in it, and students don't have access to the school, they're not going to be able to get in it. Principal Rice told me, I'm going to work hard to get students to come. I said, Kim, I love you, you're doing great work, but the way this is set up now, you won't be able to get there. And so we have to change this. So essentially, we have our high school and all of our middle schools aligned together. They are not. So where I said Camerer in the top right corner, and some now have to go to Valley, 100% can go to Ballard. 100% of those students if they choose. And now you can see we also have the elementary schools up here. We have 3 networks of elementary schools. So the green, which is PRP, Doss Valley, and Fairdale, which is on the southwest portion of it, that is Network 1. That entails Maupin, Kennedy, and King. So first and foremost, if you live in that green area, the southwest portion of what we would call, West Louisville, those families in elementary school, if they choose to stay close to home, can choose their choices are Maupin, Kennedy, and King. They then get to choose, if they want to stay close to home, this new West Louisville Middle School. And I know we got to build a middle school, and that's a promise we have to keep. We haven't built a middle or high school here since 1952. We have to keep that promise, and I know that's a promise, and there's a lack of trust that has happened from a lot of promises. That's something we have to do, and we have to do right now. You can see the blue, Network 2, Cochran, Englehart, McFerrin, and Wheatley, and you can see the high schools and the middle schools that they attend, and Network 3, which is Atkinson, Breck, Frank, Bick, and Portland, which is the red, and you can see the high school and the middle school that they would attend. So every student in this zone, if they would like to take the, and you'll see examples, the close to home option, they have the option to attend one of those elementary schools in their network. They can then attend, all the students in that zone, the new West Louisville Middle School and the academy at Shawnee. Every single student in that area. Or, as you will see, they will get to choose a reside zone school. And so this is the option now we are providing, which is the close to home option or the away from home option. So let's look at an example of this. And I know this breaks it down a little bit more, especially for a student in West Louisville. First of all, let's look at the Ballard High School Choice Zone. As you saw, if I go back, it's the same as that top corner up in the farthest area that is really around Shawnee High School. All right, so you can see it's noted on this map a little bit smaller. But that is the Ballard High School Choice Zone. I just laid you out those plans that student will have. We are eliminating all the elementaries. There are no more clusters 1 through 13. We now instead have the Ballard High School Elementary School Zone and middle school and high school. All of the students in both of these zones align with Ballard, Kammerer, and the elementary schools. And that essentially details their choices. So the Ballard High School Reside Zone encompasses those 6 elementary schools. 100% of those students go to Kammerer Middle School, and 100% go on to Ballard High School. That is their choice. Students in West Louisville will have that choice whether they are in the choice zone or in the reside zone. They get the choice of all of the schools inside, but what we do have is 100% matriculation on a feeder pattern right there. If a student lives out in the Ballard High School zone, they get the choice of those 6 elementary schools, Kammerer Middle School, Ballard High School, and as always, both students have the option for every single magnet program that they can apply for, and we'll talk about how we're going to increase magnet applications. So let's look at 2 examples here. I think,
Dr. Pollio, I'm just going to jump in real quick. And
okay,
we want to make sure that Amanda has time to speak.
you say I'm going too long?
Yeah, you got 3 minutes for Amanda at this point.
All right, sorry. That's a lot, right? It's a lot.
No, we want the community to understand the new plan, but we also
Okay.
want to make sure that we
All right,
can
we're
get
moving. Student, and I've cut a lot out of this, I'm being honest with you. Student A, the star in West Louisville right there, close to Shawnee. Their options close to home: Portland, Atkinson, Breck, Frank, Bick. Options away from home: Chansey, Dunn, Norton Commons, Norton, Wilder, Zachary, Taylor. They are guaranteed an option close to home, guaranteed an option away from home. Middle is the new West Louisville Middle School or Kammerer. The high school is the Academy at Shawnee or Ballard. All of those are guaranteed for that student with the star in the choice zone. Student B, as you can see out in the Ballard resides, their choices are the same 6 elementary schools. We do add Portland in that because they have the option in the choice zone. They have Kammerer for middle school, Ballard for high school. So we are adding choices for student in the choice zone, predominantly because we believe students in the choice zone have not had choice for so long. It's time for that to happen. So I just show you a couple of quick maps. These are the elementary boundaries. Currently, this is what's happening. Those are the middle school boundaries. Those are the high school boundaries. They don't align at all. That is not effective in how we do this. Instead, here's how it's going to look. Here are the middle school. Here are the high school. A completely different thing that helps students. I'm not going to go through this. You go through this at home. On the left is our current feeder patterns. There's 90 of them between middle and high school. So if you go to Jeffersontown High School, right in the middle of the columns up there, you see there's 9 different middle schools that kids are sent to. 9 different middle schools. That's their assigned schools. Carruthers across the top. There's 8 different high schools their 8th grade class goes to. How would you possibly have good programming that way? Over to the right is our new feeder pattern chart. Carruthers now has 2. They have 2 high schools that they send them to, Fern Creek and J-Town. And all across the board, it's that same way. So I think we go from 90 to 27. These are the networks, and I'll just show you. High schools at the top, middle schools, and then elementary schools below it. So Network 2, Network 3, I would encourage you to go take a look at these. I know that's a lot, but this is so much smaller than the feeder patterns that we have now. And so what this is going to do, it's going to build consistency, continuity, and choice. All students get choice close to home, predictability, and students in the choice zone have an additional choice, which is going to improve that sense of belonging. I'm going to touch briefly on this. We need your input before I hand it to Amanda. This is so important. We must invest in our schools. We must invest. Our board dedicated $12 million to our highest poverty schools. These are our choice zone schools. So what we want to do, we want to make sure the principal gets paid more in a choice zone school. We want to make sure the teachers get paid more in choice zone schools. We want to make sure we have more wraparound services for kids. That, yes, it's going to be higher poverty schools, but we want the resources pulled into those schools. We want great programs, like we just put a flight simulator, the best simulator in the state of Kentucky, at the Academy at Shawnee. We want families to say, well, I want my kid to have access to that. So we want one-to-one technology for everyone in facilities, and all 3 levels will have small class size. So we're dedicating every year $2.5 million to Shawnee, $2.5 million to the new West Louisville Middle School, and then our 11 schools that are much smaller schools, $7 million across those 11 schools, for a total investment of $12 million every year in the 13 choice zone schools. But we need your feedback, this one specifically. Tell us, help us. What do we need to put in these schools to make sure that they are the right options for families and are a great option? That's what we want to make sure we provide. So we have the dollars to spend. What do we need to spend it on? That's what we want to hear from you. Please give us that feedback. And finally, as I wrap up, I know that was a lot. I do want to say this. I get asked all the time, how are you going to ensure this continues? Here's what I'm going to tell you. I can't promise a future superintendent or a future Board of Education won't take steps to dismantle something. Or there's no way I can do it, or pull money back. It's impossible to do that. The only thing we can do is build into policy the ability to say, all of these things we're putting into policy. And if someone's going to change it, by law, they're going to have two public readings, so the community is notified they are trying to change our policy and our funding. I can't promise, but what I can do is put this in policy with our board so that you get notified clearly if this is changing. This is the way it's supposed to be done, like this, where we talk and give you all the facts. Not like they're doing it in Frankfurt right now, like they're doing it, like we're doing it right now, and being open and transparent about it. And then finally, each and every year, having a summative evaluation process where an outside agency comes in, audits what we're doing, and says, are we providing what we need to our schools? This is an outward-facing document by an outside agency that says they said they were going to do this, here's what they did. And if we didn't do it, we got to answer the questions, or whoever's after me. So as you can see, that was quick. I'm sorry that was so much. It's like a fire hose. I'm sure you can tell my passion about this. This is so important. Just as passionate as me is Amanda Averitt Bush, who runs the whole thing. She's the expert on this. She's going to talk to you about magnets.
Thank you. All right, so I'm a talker as well, so I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to get through these slides in 3 minutes.
No, you got a little more than that.
A little more? Okay. All right.
Amanda, take the time you need, and I will say that I know that a lot of questions tonight are probably going to be about the resources and the supporting of schools in the West End, and we will get to that in the question and answer in quite detail, I believe. So.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to take some time to walk us through the magnet section. Dr. Pollio has already mentioned how magnets were built in JCPS. So we know the foundation was in response to white flight and market share. And what that means is when districts were charged with desegregation across the country, JCPS said, just because of political will or what was going on at the time, how we are going to promote and increase diversity is we're going to make sure that we don't have families leave JCPS and go to private school. So we're going to create exclusive magnet schools to retain families. And that is what we still have today. So what we are saying is that is not the purpose of a magnet. Magnet Schools of America came in before I came to student assignment in 2015. So they came in and did an audit in 2014 and told us that we were not aligned with best practice, that magnets were built to promote diversity and increase integration. They should be located in the urban core, which is one thing that we did get right in our district, but they don't have access in the community. I had a child who was 4 years old. I was raised on Shawnee Terrace, raised my children on Shawnee Terrace a block away. We applied to a program for a 4-year-old, my daughter, who was my last child, who's now graduated, but she was not accepted 2 years in a row. Her older siblings attended the same school, so I didn't think I needed to go on a tour. I was already an engaged parent and knew about the school. She was 1 point away, had to have teacher recommendations and other things to be able to enter school as a 4-year-old because she has an early birthday. So the amount of anxiety we have on parents is not something that we are looking to continue in addressing our magnets. Magnets are used, again, to promote diversity, and they are supposed to have inclusive enrollment practices. So right now what we have is limited access for students of color, limited seats in engaging programs. We just wrapped up our first and second round of magnet applications, and I'm sorry if there are some of you in here that don't understand how their child was not accepted into a program that's on a wait list of hundreds possibly, because that's what we currently have with our system. We have inconsistent quality across magnet programs. If you have a specific theme in your school, you should be able to go to a different school with the same theme and receive the same experience within that theme. Our application process is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It's extremely difficult. Families have to go through 5 different platforms to be able to apply, not to mention having to then go to the school if the school has criteria that's not connected with the application process that some families don't know about, so then you have an incomplete application and your child doesn't have the ability to access that school. That is no longer going to be the case if our recommendations move forward. Lastly, we have school-initiated exits. Now, I have 3 children that all came through JCPS. They are lovely 98% of the time, but if they're not, they're mine. And so I take ownership. We go through those difficult times and we work through our issues. Right now, we have magnet schools that say if you don't follow the line that I have drawn, then you need to go on to greener pasture. So what message does that give to our students? You take ownership, you implement interventions, you have resources to be able to ensure that that student is successful in that program. Because how is the next school going to respond? And how do they feel having to transition? And so moving forward, this proposal will address a comprehensive magnet strategy. So no longer will the basis of our magnets be in response to market share. We are going to be aligned with Magnet Schools of America. We are missing out on millions of dollars that they give out grants to improve magnets that we've submitted several times, but we're never going to receive it because we're not aligned. And so we will have a strategy in place to make us competitive so that we can strengthen our magnets. We're going to have a transparent and trustworthy system of strong resourced magnets. We're going to improve equity and access in our magnet schools and programs. And what's going to keep us toward our North Star is clarifying our purpose and making sure that we're aligned. So on the next slide, you'll see sort of the areas of focus. And what I will say, I will be presenting this in a smaller, more intimate setting next Tuesday when we have our board community forum. So I welcome you to come to that at Shawnee next Tuesday so that we can go through this in more depth. But again, what we will be looking at is having that clear focus, making sure that we have program standards. So if you have a theme implemented in your school, there is school accountability, and there also is accountability on the district to be able to make sure that schools have that support to have successful magnet programs. Reviewing non-magnetic magnets. In 2009, a former superintendent decided to pass out magnets like Oprah. You get a magnet, you get a magnet. Well, some, because of strong leadership, flourished, and then some did not. But there was not guidance or support to be able to ensure that the theme was implemented with fidelity. We want to make sure that we're reviewing magnets because we are taking a stand and we are asking the community to be behind us and our board to be behind this, to say we are moving forward in the correct way. We want to do magnets right in JCPS, and that is how our future looks. Looking at moving themes, this is an issue that we have. Best practice is whole school implementation, wall to wall, whether it's your reside school or whether you've applied to go there. So we have a situation at Hawthorne, which, if you don't know, that's one of our elementary schools. They're Spanish immersion. They implement wall to wall, but they're also a cluster school. So we have 4th and 5th graders, and I say even 2nd, that are being assigned through our cluster application process who have never engaged in instruction in Spanish, but they implement wall to wall. So they are there, and that is not best practice. So we are looking to move Hawthorne to a whole school magnet so families know what the experience is going to be like in that building. We're also looking at, and this is going to be for Dr. Pollio, he is committed to dedicating resources and support to ensure that we are able to have strong magnets within our district and implementing a new school redesign process so we don't have a situation as we did in 2009. Equity is huge because if you have a foundation that's built on market share and white flight, then we know what our magnet schools look like inside the building. And so we want to make sure that we have diversity targets and goals in place for each of our magnet programs to ensure that they work toward the goal of looking like our student population. Not saying that we have students of color in one program, but we have another that looks completely different because that's where we belong. That is no longer going to be the case. And the district is going to be there to support those efforts to make sure that we're moving. So that could look like running their criteria through a racial equity analysis protocol to look at inequities in the criteria in admissions process to make sure that we're addressing that. Removing school-initiated exits. Having a centralized lottery. When I first came to the department, it was quite strange to me that we had a lottery that was implemented at the school level, that the school managed. And so we want to make sure that there's transparency. I talk to parents on a daily basis, and they may not be happy that they are number 68, but we want to make sure that the process was equitable so that families can make an informed decision and that it's transparent for families. Also making sure, again, I've talked about the mirror themes. We want to make sure that there is theme alignment. And then access, replicating our popular magnets. If we have magnets where we have wait lists in the hundreds, sometimes thousands, we want to make sure that we're responding to the demand of the community and replicating those programs. They should be in the urban core. That is where they should be, in the choice zone. But again, families in the community should have that access. We will have a new technology platform in the fall. So no longer will you have separate platforms that you need to engage in. It will all be in one. So if there are a wait list, you will get text messages. You will be able to check the status of your application. If you are on a wait list, you'll be able to go there. Criteria will be uploaded in the application. So again, we're moving in the right direction, and we will have targeted outreach to be able to support having an equitable application pool as well. We will also be reviewing our magnet boundaries to make sure that they are equitable across the board, and looking at continuation in our themes K through 12. An example of this was we have Montessori at the elementary level. We then added Montessori at the middle at Westport, and then at the high school at Central. And so we will be looking at creating themes where students are able to continue in that process K through 12 if families want that. And so I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Pollio. I know, again, that was a lot of information, but we will be going through this in depth. We are, again, committed to changing the way magnets look like in our district. And we know that it's going to be a road that we are going to travel, but we are ready to start that now. So I hope that you all will come out and provide that feedback so that we are able to move.
Amanda has done an amazing job of changing the department already. Huge advances, but as she says, you can only go so far until we change the engine in the car, which we're doing right now. So here's what it's going to be implemented. Here's what we're going to look like. If this, and you'll see the timeline for passing, this will not affect 22, 23 at all. The upcoming year is set. We would like to pass these in front of our board. The recommendations, we will be bringing them before the summertime so that we can work on it, and when selection season happens in the fall, showcase of school, all of those things, we have the new stuff ready to go for families. They begin selecting schools for kindergarten, 6th grade, and 9th grade. We want to let families know no student is going to be sent out of their current school. Last thing we want to do is to impact student belonging. So these will happen at transitions, which will take a little bit longer of time. But we will begin in 23, 24, if passed by our board, that dual resides with the feeder patterns for kindergarten, 6th grade, and 9th grade. And so timeline, you know, here is some of the things we're doing. We're right in that middle box now, which is March and April, these community forums, feedback sessions. We're going to be out on the road. Let you know, Amanda referenced it, next Tuesday night, community forum at Shawnee, at the Academy at Shawnee. We will have breakout sessions there where you can go and interact and ask questions specifically in a smaller room. So join us there. We'll be out on the road in April, coming to the community to talk more. In May, we'll have a couple of board work sessions. The soonest we would put this in front of our board is late May. The latest will be early June. So that's our goal right now, is to get, so we have 2 months, a little over 2 months, to get feedback and input and do this right. You're going to see several ways in which you can provide input. There's a school choice proposal website. It's up now. Go to it. I get asked a lot. They want to see the full plan. The PowerPoint will be up there. Within the next week, we are going to upload about a 300-page plan or more. I don't know what the number is, but you will have that plan. You can dig into it. We will have that for the community to take a look into. It will have all the maps, all the information, anything that you would need. There's going to be online feedback forms. We're going to have virtual in-person sessions, and I told you about the community forum. But without a doubt, you can see it's a lot. We've got so much work to do. It's been 40 years. The time is now to make this change. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pollio, and thank you, Amanda, for going over that. It is a lot of information, and we appreciate that you kind of did a speedy version of it this evening, and we asked them to do that a little bit on the faster side tonight, because we do want to dedicate at least an hour to questions and answers. So I think it's about 7:30 right now. Sadiqa has given us permission to be here probably as late as we need to ask questions, but definitely until about 8:30, 8:45. So we're going to get started in a second. I'm going to throw it over to Vita Morgan, who's sitting up front here in the fuchsia jacket. She is our Senior Director for Engagement, Diversity, and Opinion. She is the one who's been collecting all your text-in questions. Again, if you want to ask a question, the number is on the screen there, 502-354-8601. And before we jump into that, though, I am going to ask our panelists up on the stage that you have not met yet to introduce yourselves and tell us your name and title.
Hi, Dr. Kishkumi Price, and I am the Commissioner of Workforce Investment and Special Advisor to the Governor. Is my mic live? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I think I'm just going to take it off. Hi, sorry, Dr. Kishkumi Price, and I'm the Commissioner of Workforce Investment and Special Advisor to the Governor, and glad to be here today. More importantly, I'm a JCPS parent.
Raul Cunningham, President of the Louisville Branch NAACP and a member of the NAACP National Board of Directors.
Hi, I'm Brent McKim. I am a high school science teacher in JCPS, and I am the elected president of the Jefferson County Teachers Association, which represents about 6,000 educators in the Jefferson County Public Schools.
Thank you all for being here. Now I know that our panelists have actually seen this full presentation before, so I'm going to actually let them jump in with some of their initial reactions, and feel free to direct them to whoever you'd like on the panel here. But Kish, what is your biggest concern or questions left unanswered?
Thank you for that. I would say at this point, we're talking about a student assignment plan and not necessarily giving context to the fact that how we got here, and that in order for us to be in a place where as parents that we can feel good about the choices that our students and our kids have, that we're able to say that there's a commitment from the city as well. And so part of my concern is the level of commitment we have from our leaders to admit that this isn't just the lift of JCPS, but it's the lift of the city, because there were a lot of intentional things done, that got us here. And so we have to have intentionality to get out of it. One of my major concerns about the student assignment plan at this point is the acknowledgement of the skeletons in the closet, and I applaud Dr. Pollio. Yeah. I applaud him for sharing some of those, but I think there are more that we need to acknowledge, expose, and address. One of those being PTA. So when we talk about the PTA, which is a wonderful addition and resource for schools, when you look at schools that are high in poverty, the PTA usually is not a good resource, because there is an involvement, there is an engagement, there is an investment. So what are we doing when we say we're going to have these great new schools to address that? We also have issues around teachers and the teachers choosing where they want to work. And that should be something that educators get to do, especially when you have put in the investment into education. But if we're going to be real about what it is, new schools usually get inexperienced teachers. Those inexperienced teachers do not have the level of investment in understanding classroom management and family engagement, and they need some support. And I'm not saying that's for everybody, but it is the reality. Who started a job without any experience, and you're cool with not having any kind of mentoring and coaching? It doesn't happen. And so that's why we see that a lot of these schools are not getting the level of attention that's necessary. So that's, I said a lot, but I think my question there is, the question is, what kinds of commitments can we have, not to solve all the issues, but to say we're going to call out all the skeletons that we know of that are in the closet and try to at least address them.
So I'll start with that, and anyway, I think those are great points, Dr. Price, and right on the money. And You know, I think I am one that will be pretty honest about many of the skeletons that are in the closet as much as I can be. I've been in the district for 25 years. So we have to do that. We have to know how we got here. We've spent the past couple of years at least talking about the problems in the current student assignment. I'm not here to indict anyone from the past, you know, whether it's the 80s, 90s, whatever. You know, that is not my role. My role is to say, what do we need to do now to improve student outcomes? I will say this, and you are accurate about that. One of the major concerns that I hear all the time is around how are we going to have our best and brightest teachers in our highest need schools. I was a principal at Doss High School. So, you know, 85% poverty. I know what it was like. I know what it was like to have a teacher vacancy and have one applicant for the job. That's not really good perspective, especially if that applicant doesn't give a good interview. And you're saying, do I now hire this person or risk the chance of not having someone in that classroom? And so what I want more than anything, and I want to say this, veteran teachers are great. I stand by it. Experience matters. But more than anything, enthusiasm and passion for this work matters. So I want more than anything a teacher coming in that says, I want to be here, I want to engage with these students, I want to make them. That is what we have to have. Now, some of that is experience, some of that may be newer teachers. And that's what we have to have, but what that requires is options. And so, you know, I want to be clear here. I don't believe that compensation is the only thing that matters when getting teachers to come to high-need schools. You have to build a culture where they feel a sense of belonging, I said that before, and a part of a family. That's a requirement of leadership and principals to do that, because it is harder work, there is no doubt about it. But in the end, increased compensation, I believe, will bring more options for a principal when they can go out for that teacher vacancy and they have 4 people to interview instead of 1, and then they can make the best choice for that staff and faculty, and I think that's imperative.
I'm going to call an audible and we'll get back to you all, I promise, but I think it's important while we're on this topic to dig into it. As some of you may know, back in 2018, JCTA worked with JCPS to negotiate into the contract stipends for teachers who would be willing to transfer to AIS schools. You might have heard of them as priority schools. Generally, they are the ones that are high poverty, low performing. Those stipends at the time, do either of you know how much they are off the top of your head?
Excuse me, to transfer in, for an experienced teacher to transfer in, there's a stipend of $1,000 to transfer in, and then there is an enhanced stipend to remain there of $1,600 a year, and if you stay for 5 years, it bumps up to $2,000 per year, and every 5 years it goes up a little bit more.
So I think one thing that we need to talk about is whether or not that's enough, right? I think that's something that I've certainly heard from teachers as I've been out in the district. So Dr. Pollio, in your presentation and your plan, you do have a note there about teacher compensation for teachers in what is now called the choice zone. Everybody should start to become familiar with that term. What do you want to see in your ideal scenario? Is it a larger stipend? Is it we're just going to the basics and creating a new salary scale?
Well,
what do you want to see?
One of 2 that I would like to see that we negotiate with JCTA, and Brett and I have already started discussions about this, would be, and so instead of just having a flat rate, what we have right now for any job in JCPS is a pay scale, and that's most jobs. You go in, if you're year 1 and you have a college degree, you get this amount of dollars, and then as your education and your experience goes up, you get more pay. I believe we need a separate pay scale for teachers that are going into our choice zone schools that increases each and every time they stay there. So if you remain in there, that pay is going to increase year after year. And so there's a multiplier, so to speak, on each and every one. And so the longer you stay, the more you will make when it comes to being in a choice zone or an AIS school.
So let's just talk through an example. Let's say I am a first-year teacher coming out of college. If I get a job at Dunn Elementary, I will be paid, a first-year teacher salary. If I get a job at King Elementary, my first-year salary would be automatically higher than that peer that goes to Dunn.
Correct.
That's what you're looking for?
Yes.
Okay. Would JCTA support that, Brent?
Well, essentially, we already have that. Like right now, if you went to Dunn versus someone who went to a priority school, the beginning teacher would be making about $1,600 a year more at the priority school than the first-year teacher at Dunn.
Through the stipends?
Yes, through that. So we already have a form of that. We're certainly open to discussing that with the district. I think it's a variation on what we have right now, so I don't see that as a particular challenge with bargaining. We'd certainly be open to talking about that.
I just want to make sure I'm clear and that everybody else is clear. Would you be open to renegotiating a salary schedule, or is it only going to be, for you guys, stipends?
But I think we're certainly open to discussing that. What we have discussed when we've discussed with the Dr. Pollio is probably something that would add, maybe 2% to every cell that is on the existing salary schedule or something like that, so that it would create more incentive, particularly for more experienced teachers. So that's the kind of thing I think we're talking about in terms of, it wouldn't be a totally separate schedule, but it would be sort of like an enhancement or accelerator that would be applied to every cell on the schedule.
And I think sometimes when we are talking about this subject, and sometimes it is applied at the school level, but in this case we're talking about teacher salaries, that it's, well, if you're going to do some from this group, you have to do something for the whole group. Is that your stance at this point when it comes to this increased teacher compensation?
I think as a baseline that teachers need a reasonable raise for all teachers. So I think that is a foundational sort of thing. We have a teacher crisis, and so we have to have a meaningful raise. I mean, our teachers, like everyone else, are very concerned legitimately about the inflation that's happening right now and the loss of their buying power. So all teachers need a raise, and it's not an either or. It cannot be an either or. We need to have a good raise for teachers, but then we can also target resources to attract and keep teachers at challenging schools or choice zone schools.
Is there a stipend number that you have suggested in your negotiations?
Well, I want to take a moment to put this in some perspective, and I encourage people to think through this, because let's take a hypothetical school that had like 50 teachers. You could say, wow, we want to really have a major incentive, and we're going to offer $10,000 extra to be at this school for all of these positions. And we think that will really move the needle on getting people to go there. If you've got 50 teaching positions and you're paying an extra $10,000 for each one, that's $500,000 that you were talking about putting into enhanced teacher salaries at the school. Maybe that is the most effective and beneficial thing you could do with $500,000 of extra funding going into that school. But I think you also have to weigh into that, well, what else would the $500,000 provide? Would it provide, for example, 5 additional mental health practitioners for the students to deal with the trauma that they come with, in addition to a number of additional high-impact tutoring opportunities that we know moves the needle significantly? And is that more beneficial for investing $500,000 into that particular site, or is it better to put it on salaries? I'm not making that judgment, but I think if we're starting to talk about let's have a lot of money going into that, I think we have to understand that there are multiple options that we have to think about and what will make the biggest difference for kids at that site. And we should try to do what we think will have the most beneficial impact for the kids at the site.
Kish or Raul, do you want to respond to that?
No.
Okay. Kish, would you like to? You can use
Yeah, so I guess my question about that notion of the investment for a blanket investment and then what that means for the bigger picture, I want to kind of back up a little bit to what you were saying before. Would the plan to provide that increase for teachers that would be in the choice schools be contingent upon the raise for every teacher, or were you saying that those were separate?
So you have to understand, when we negotiate an agreement, the agreement has to be approved by our full membership. We're a very democratic organization. So if you had all of the financial resources that went into say 25% of the schools, and there was no raise anyplace else, and you sent that out to be ratified by all of the members, it probably would not be ratified. So I think it probably is not realistic to think that all of the resources should go there. And frankly, we've really struggled. One of the things that we've been dealing with is this vicious circle where we have not had enough classroom teachers and we've not had enough substitute teachers, and so the teachers are having to cover for each other when teachers aren't there because we don't have subs, which burns the teachers out, and then they leave, which creates even more vacancies and stretches the teachers that are still there even further or thinner. So that's where it's like the entire district is really struggling to keep staff, and I think pay is an important part of that. So I think we have to absolutely look at the entire district, but we have to also say there is particular need here and we need to address that. And it's a balance. Ultimately, I think it's a balance.
I'm glad you said that. So I just want to kind of call out the fact that we're in a pivotal moment where everybody is going to be called to shift perspective, that we cannot do what we've done before and think that it's okay. So I'm glad you said that. I think that has been the historical pattern, but in order for us to move forward, it can't be about me and mine. I got to get mine before you get yours, or I got to get my kid into this school and whatever with yours. In order for us to progress as a community, we have to be invested in making sure that the plan works for everybody.
Thank you. Vita, I'm actually going to ask you to turn on your mic over there and give us an audience question.
You hear me? Okay. All right. We have a ton of audience questions. What happens if a student in West Louisville wants to attend their choice in the East End, but there are limited openings? Do students who live in the East End get priority on that East End spot?
So families in the choice zone will
Amanda,
can you hear me?
Yeah, just you.
Okay. Families in the choice zone will have a guaranteed option close to home and far away. So we worked with our consultant to ensure that our capacities in our school will guarantee that choice. And in addition to that, again, this will be a family choice. And if the next year, if they're at the suburban or reside zone school and they want to the next year change, the family will be able to do that from year to year.
And I want to reiterate those words that she said, family choice. I probably didn't say that enough. It is time we give that choice to families in West Louisville. Families have the opportunity to make that choice. Amanda probably gets called more than anything from parents in the choice zone right now saying, I want choice. And she's not able to give them that choice. It's time to have family choice.
Just to clarify on that, let's say that a family in the West End has their heart set on Chansey Elementary. That's in their corresponding choice zone over there. is Chansey guaranteed for them, or you're just saying one of the East End schools guaranteed for them?
So currently we have what's called elementary clusters, which are a little different from middle and high school, where you have the one school that's tied to your address. So families will have to rank their choices in either the option close to home or the faraway option in, let's say, the Ballard High School reside zone. So they will be ranking their choices, but they will be guaranteed an option either close to home or far away.
At that Chansey level, though, is there any mechanism that will be in place to ensure equitable access to Chansey? And by that I mean, would there be seats equitably reserved for the proportion of students on the West End that could opt to go there?
So I will tell you that's probably a two-part question. So one of the things that we are looking at is making sure that we have targeted outreach for families in the choice zone when they are engaging in the application process. Historically, what has happened with the 75% of families that are choosing a first choice close to home is they may be applying later in the year, and so those seats may be filled. What we are looking at is to make sure we have equitable access for families in the choice zone. This is, and I'm going to be very transparent, this is something that is new for us. And so looking at that, it's hard to say, are we guaranteeing a specific school? We want to make sure that we're doing what we said we're going to do. And so looking at how that works, we're definitely open to feedback about what that looks like.
Raul, I want to give you a chance to join us in the conversation. What is on your mind right now? What do you want to ask Dr. Pollio or anybody else on the panel?
First of all, thank Dr. Pollio and his staff for coming. What we saw this evening, if you'll notice, it said recommendations for a student assignment plan. That recommendations, if you were to look at the pages, was 74 pages. Dr. Pollio told us that the final plan may be as much as 300 pages. Therefore, before coming to a final conclusion, I want to see what's on those other pages.
Dr. Pollio, can you speak to that? Raul, we know, and a lot of people in this community, there's an element of trust here, right? And while the PowerPoint gives us a nice overview, I think my colleague Olivia Krauth talked to a professor over at U of L who said the devil is in the details. When will the community be able to see the full plan?
Yeah, and I'd love to have talked. You only gave me 20 minutes to talk tonight. How am I going to cover 300 pages? I took longer than 20 just for the
Where's the
PowerPoint.
plan, Dr. Pollio? Where's the plan?
So Mr. Cunningham is right. I mean, the hard part about this is covering all the details of such a massive thing in a PowerPoint. And so trying to make it efficient, and understandable for folks. I mean, I told you I was in the district for 20 years and didn't understand the student assignment plan until I started studying it. So presenting it to citizens and stakeholders who aren't doing the work every day is very challenging. So yes, providing a PowerPoint so it's understandable, that is overview of the concepts and recommendations, but then also putting it into a document that is laying out exactly the policies we will be, the recommendations, the maps, all of the maps. So you just saw Ballard's map. There will be every high school's map. There will be data for all of the schools, the anticipated data when it comes to diversity and those type of things right there. So, you know, we plan on within, I think we'll have that to by the end of next week. Before spring break is here, we will have that posted on our website, which will give 2 months to access this plan. It will give the opportunity to get feedback and make changes if needed. And I want to say this, I understand the lack of trust. I don't understand it as closely as those that have lived it, but I've seen it and know it, being as a part of this. I know it from being a teacher at Shawnee High School with a condemned third floor for 40 years. And so I understand that lack of trust and respect that lack of trust. You will see in this document we are being very transparent. We are not trying to hide anything. Amanda said it, we want to be transparent because the last thing we want is 10 years from now to someone to look back and say, those two stood up there, promised us this, and they did that. And so we are looking forward to getting that to you, Mr. Cunningham.
Well, thank you. My question?
Sure.
Okay. Dual resides is a major part of your presentation or the recommendations. Some of us have looked at dual resides, and we think that probably will cause resegregation of the schools. If you would explain the difference between dual resides and neighborhood schools, which the community did reject some time ago.
Sure, thank you. Great question. And I want to say this. First of all, I would like to sit up here and champion that our schools are diverse right now and not segregated. Unfortunately, that's not the case. That is not the case. And so when we have what I said before, which is the 5th most segregated housing pattern in America, and socioeconomically, this community is very segregated. We have to admit that as a group here right now. It becomes very challenging not to have it. And I will say this, there is only one other way for us to truly desegregate the schools, and that would be go back to having students come both ways again. That is the only way for that to happen. There is no way for us to provide desegregated schools in West Louisville unless we transport students from other communities in.
And Dr. Pollio, what do you say to folks out there and families on the west side that ask, why can't we do that? Why, even under this new plan, the burden is still in many ways going to be on black students to integrate even for middle school and high school, they don't have an option unless they go through a magnet or a transfer to go to the new West End Middle School or to go to Shawnee. So it's still, I think, for many in this community, they don't see the burden being truly lifted. What do you say to that?
So what I would say to that is what was our focus in this? Student outcomes. It was on student outcomes. And I'm just saying this, I don't think moving a student to another neighborhood is necessarily just going to directly impact and improve student outcomes unless the family is choosing to do that. West Louisville families haven't had the choice to do that. We need to do that, but it's about improving outcomes for our students. And so I don't think just moving students around is going to improve outcomes for students specifically in West Louisville. That has to be our focus. If we are going to change outcomes, we give families the choice, we still allow them to leave the community if that's what they choose to do, and we resource the schools properly, which would be equitably here, more funding in our higher poverty schools, but also give them great programming if they choose to go to a school outside of their community. So I think it's about a focus on outcomes that we haven't had before.
Is it fair to say, though, we're all here, let's just put the issue on the table and let's acknowledge it if this is the case, that the idea of requiring East End families to do what these families have been doing for 40 years is never going to happen, that is not an option?
I think that's a fair statement. And I will say this, from the time it happened in 1976, there's not a city in America doing that right now. So we would be the lone school district doing that. I'm not saying that's not the way to go, but I would say your statement is accurate.
Vita, can we have another audience question?
Yes, and just to point out, several people had questions about, are we going back to separate but equal? Haven't we done this already? All black schools, how will we keep or build diversity with these changes? And then a question, how are the West Louisville schools going to fare as it relates to equitable resources, finances, facilities, being poured into these schools so that families are not sacrificing access to rich opportunity for the comfort of proximity?
So I will say this, right now, and as I said before, the belief that we are sending students from West Louisville out to low poverty schools, that is not true. It is not happening right now, guys. We have to understand 75% of the students we are sending out of this community are going to high poverty schools. Many are going to schools like Iroquois and Doss and Valley they do great work. I'm not saying that they don't. Those teachers do work, but we are under the belief we are sending students all to low poverty schools. That is not happening right now because our district is 70% free and reduced lunch and majority minority students. That's what's happening right now. So, the paradigm of what it was in 1976 is not happening right now, and we have to understand that. Secondly, there is no doubt we have to resource equitably. I know I've heard the stories, I've read the stories about separate but supposedly equal that wasn't equal. And we cannot go back to that without a doubt. What we have to do is equitably resource, which means that extra $2.5 million every single year into the academy at Shawnee. Building a brand new middle school, a state-of-the-art middle school that families are going to want to go to with top-of-the-line athletic facilities that have the extra $2.5 million a year. I can tell you this, I talked to a principal. We were selling this to principals of a Choice Zone elementary school. And she said, I only have about 30 white students in my whole school. How will this change this? And I said, I don't know if it's necessarily going to do that, but you get an extra $700,000 a year to support your students. She said, I'm good. I like that. I like that plan. So it's about equitable resources. And you're right, and I want to say this again, we have to put that in policy so it can't be pulled away without the community knowing.
And I think we've seen that before, right? If I remember correctly, a few years back, there was an attempt to redistribute some resources to higher needs schools by asking more advantaged schools to pay for maybe like an arts teacher out of their own budget. Something happened like that. But then I think within a year or so, the board voted and switched it right back to the way it is. And so I just want to make sure when we're talking about equitable, that is giving one group more because they need more, right? So looking at the details of the support plan, can you talk through in any more detail of how giving schools more because they need more will play out when you talk about mental health, when you talk about class size?
Yeah, sure. So once again, I'll say this. We've dedicated the money building the plan. We want input from, and we want the schools to be able to build this too. So we don't want central office saying, here's $2.5 million, you have to spend it this way. We've said without a doubt we want higher teacher pay, we want higher principal pay, we want one-to-one technology, every student with a laptop and every student with connectivity at home and at school. So they have the opportunity for the internet at school as well as home. There's no doubt that more counselors impact students in a positive way. So increasing the student teacher, the counselor to student ratio to less than 200 to 1, maybe 150 to 1 is what we're looking to do. No doubt about that. And so those resources and mental health counselors, but then we also want to have the school to have access to these resources so that they with their families can choose what they want to do to support their student population as well.
Okay. And I want to pause on the mental health counselors, practitioners aspect of the plan. I know, having worked in a high poverty middle school, I mean, one student could take up an entire mental health counselor's day and do that almost every day. So do we think, I understand what you're saying, that 150 to 1 would be better, but is that really the goal that we should be shooting for?
Well, I'll say this, we can shoot for much lower. Unfortunately, right now, all across, we are in staffing shortages on everything. So when we talk about mental health professionals, we have to have the health professionals to put them in. So that's number one, but we are thinking about this long term. I don't think at all I would say that that is the perfect scenario. But what I want to say is a choice zone school, let's say it's 150 to 1, and a non-choice school maybe 200 or 250 to 1. That's what I think is equity when we're talking about choice zone. And then continuing to monitor that and put into policy that if our board increases revenue by more than, or at 4% every year, a portion of that continues to go to our choice zone schools in policy so that we can continue to grow and support those in additional ways.
Did you want to say something, Brent?
Not on that.
Okay. Kish?
I just wanted to make a comment. So the ratio of one mental health practitioner to 250 students is American Counselors Association recommendation for an average school population. What we're talking about is 70% of our school district being free and reduced lunch and high poverty. So that is not the goal. You asked the question, that can't be the goal. We have to acknowledge that our kids are coming with the adverse childhood experiences, whatever the new buzzword is, they got them. And so we have to have a better ratio of adults, caring, compassionate adults to our kids. That is the narrative. I will say this, I know we got more questions coming, but this just keeps coming up in my spirit, and so I'm going to say it. There's a parable about a wise man and a foolish man, right? The comparison is for us to be the wise men, right? That we are not building houses on sinking sand. We're not building schools in communities where we know there's no investment. So if we're going to talk about building the schools, we have to also couple that with the investment in the community. And I'm not talking about gentrification, I'm talking about investment in the community, in the people that live in the community. Sorry.
Can I say one thing? It is important that I say this, and I couldn't agree more with Dr. Price on her comments on that. 1 to 150 is not going to be enough. But I still want to say, too, your comment from earlier about the community and the city owning a part of this as well. You know, once again, we always turn to the public school system around this nation, not just here, to solve the ills of our societies and communities. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be a major part of that, but we've got to hold other agencies accountable as well. If we have kids with mental health issues, we need the community to step up as well.
On that note, I know that CEQA had folks raise their hand at the beginning. I did not see Mayor Fisher or I don't think members of the Metro Council, correct me if I'm wrong. Should they have been here tonight? Okay. And I'm also going to point out something else that doesn't often get brought up in this conversation is let's talk about mental health practitioners. There aren't enough, just like there aren't enough teachers. Well, who really is responsible for that? Our higher ed institutions, right? That's who's training and putting these folks out into the world. And are any of those folks here tonight? Any of the deans of any of the education schools? Vita, you had a question?
Yeah, I just have a lot of questions from people in the audience. So, several about teachers. How will class size be affected by this proposal, and will we get seasoned, more experienced teachers in our West End schools?
So I'll go back to that. First of all, you know, small class size is our goal in the choice zone schools, and to fund schools based on a small class size. I can tell you the challenge, small class size means more teachers. Let us hope and pray that the teacher shortage is corrected soon. We will build this structure for long term, but there is no doubt that smaller class sizes means more teachers. But we provide the funding for that. Once again, I will say this. Yes, I think seasoned and experienced teachers are great, but more important than anything is the will to do the work. The last thing I want is a teacher in a choice zone, and I'll tell you this, at DOS, the last thing I wanted was a teacher who didn't want to be there. I didn't want a teacher who didn't. Give me someone who wants to be there, who walks in the door, who says, I understand I got it. These kids come to us with challenges. I don't care what you did yesterday. Come on back today. All right, you didn't get it yesterday. We're going to get you today. That is a special person that does that. And so, yes, experience is important, but I still say this, a combination of ensuring that a principal can bring in a strong staff that is passionate about it, and that is where that compensation piece comes in.
And I don't think we've been clear enough on the principal role in this and where the barriers are. Could you explain, if I am a principal and I want to build a team that I believe can support these kids in the way that they need to be supported, what is the obstacle right now when it comes to being able to select the teachers that you have in your school?
Well, so first of all, let me say this when it comes to being a principal. Our culture of school accountability in this nation, let's be clear about what it's doing. It's not just kids are tougher, but it is the fact that the only schools that are truly held accountable are our high poverty schools. Those are the ones that only are held accountable, meaning punished, and I'll use the word punished, by the feds and the state to say you're a low performing school, so we're going to do X, Y, and Z as a result. That's been the past 2 decades in this nation, and it has not produced better schools. What it has done has said to teachers and to principals, I'm not doing that because it might cost me my career. When I went from J-Town to Doss, I had been 8 years at J-Town. I went to Doss. I knew that in 1 year I was going to have an audit by the state, and they could easily say, you don't have the capacity to be principal here anymore, and it would impact my career. That has happened negatively to principals in this district time and time again, and at higher levels to principals of color. But what it means is, why would I go from a lower poverty, a safer school, to a higher poverty school when I might get told within 2 years, you don't have capacity to stay here? That's what's happening, and so there is a lot of that outside pressure that is also driving this too, and it's also making a culture inside the school of test prep. We've got to double up in the things that get you ready for an assessment, and that's harming kids as well. So that's a big thing in the way about getting principals to the school. We have built in a mechanism where teachers, if a teacher doesn't want to be at a high poverty school, an AIS school, the principal can move them. But what we have to do is make sure we have more teachers that are willing to come to these schools, and that's where the compensation comes in.
Can I add a couple things to that? Building on what Dr. Pollio was talking about, we've had situations to have experienced teachers in buildings. One important way to have experienced teachers in buildings is to reduce the turnover of teachers transferring out of buildings. You want them to choose to stay there over longer periods of time, and you get more experienced teachers. You don't want a revolving door where teachers transfer out or leave the district or leave the profession. And part of what Dr. Pollio was talking about is if a school gets put in the category by the state of a low-performing school, they will send in from the Kentucky Department of Ed an education recovery specialist and an education recovery leader, and those folks may say, we've gotten reports from buildings where our teachers are saying to us, they call them ERSs or ERLs, E-R-S or E-R-L. The ERSs or the ERLs told us every single period we have to write down every single learning target for every single class, and then we have to write down every single student who missed any one of those learning targets during that period, and we have to write down for every single student that missed a learning target individually what we're going to do for that student, and we're losing our planning period to even do that because they're requiring us to have these professional development things during the day. And so at other schools, they don't have all of that piled up on them, so these teachers make a reasonable decision to transfer someplace that doesn't have that. So the very processes that the state rains down on a priority school can contribute to the turnover. And one other thing about reducing turnover is we know generally from research out of, for example, Rutgers University, that a school that serves primarily low-income students will typically have a 3 times higher teacher turnover rate than one that serves a student population that is not concentrated poverty. But if the teachers in that building have a collaborative working environment with the building principal where they feel like they are efficacious and their voice matters and they have a role in determining the decisions of how the academic program works in the school, if they feel it's collaborative, it goes from being 3 times higher to actually being a slightly lower turnover rate because they feel like they are making a difference. So that collaborative atmosphere in the school and having educators empowered and not sort of dictated to or micromanaged is really important for avoiding the turnover.
Yes, most certainly the state has a role in this and a big piece of it. I want to shift our focus back to what's up for discussion tonight, and part of that is me letting us wander a little bit. Raul, do you have a question?
Regarding principals, in your proposal, you use the term executive principal is used. What does that mean, and the project manager?
So the executive principal, essentially to pay a principal more to be in a choice zone school, we need to make a new job description for them. And so executive principal is the name that we would attach to that. That would then accompany with them a higher pay grade. So that principal would make more money than the other principals.
Would that be in all zone schools?
The choice zone schools, yes.
Yes, okay.
And then your second, I think you had a second question?
About the project manager.
Oh, the project manager, we want to dedicate someone in the early years to ensure that what we say we're getting to schools, they're working on that full time. They, with the 13 choice zone schools, are ensuring they have what they need to be successful.